One News Now mobile app for Apple and Android devices. Thanks for listening.
Chris Brooks.
A lot of parents raised their kids in church and did, in kind of scare quotes, everything right. And now they're looking at junior or sis or their son or daughter who's walked away from the faith and said, your God is not my God. And they're wanting to know, what do we do to reach them?
Tuned in to Equipped, weekday afternoons at 12 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It's exactly what we've been saying all along. We're glad that they finally caught up. It's sad. It's hurtful for the country that it's taken 2 years to get there. We have been saying all along that there was absolutely no collusion. And I think it's time for everybody to be able to move on and move forward.
Well, I'm not going to be disappointed in the president. I'm disappointed in Congress. I mean, the president wants to keep the government open. If he uses this as a vehicle, so be it.
Democrats control the House, Republicans control the Senate. Donald Trump is the president. This legislation is a product of trying to find common ground.
The conference committee has done its job. It's forged a bipartisan agreement that would keep government open through September, as well as provide additional border security.
We'll see what the final package looks like, and the president will make a determination on whether or not he's going to sign it. But you can rest assured the president promised he was going to build the wall, and he's going to deliver.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, everyone wants to find someone to blame just in case the deal doesn't go down and the government gets shut down again. Everyone wants to not be the one who's responsible for it while being the one who's responsible for maybe, nothing. It's the most ludicrous thing in the world that we're having this kind of argument about something so fundamental and basic as national security in the form of a southern border. And I also think it's interesting, just to launch right into the show here without any prelude or anything, more and more people are finding their way down to the border, and these are not partisans, or if they are, they're going down to the border in a way that is kind of like, hey, I'm taking a trip to the border. It's like a sightseeing trip. And what they're finding is a mixture of things, everything from actual border fencing that looks pretty impenetrable to what looks like. So there's something called horse fencing. I know everyone is familiar with that. It's just, boards that are horizontal and they're kind of hammered into holes in vertical posts. And horse fencing is really effective for kind of corralling horses. Unless your horses are professional jumpers, they're not gonna go over this fencing. So it's not very high. It's not even 4 feet high. Sometimes you'll find a little fancier horse fencing that's a little taller than that, but for the most part, it's very open, and usually you don't even find it reinforced with wire fencing. It's just, it basically it delineates property lines, and it makes a very visually appealing fencing, and it's also cheap, so you can do hundreds of acres with it. The border of hundreds of acres, much cheaper than if you were to go with something like a PVC or wrought iron or even chain link. It's just, the issue is you have tons and tons and tons, or acres and acres and acres of space to fence. And so I thought it was super interesting that on Twitter, this is a guy I've never actually heard of before, but he was a part of the Trump administration for a brief period of time as a speechwriter and some other things. And so he took a trip down to the southern border, and he's getting retweeted by people who I would consider to be pretty moderate, individuals who are hardly, hard on the right like me. And what he did was he went down to the border in different places, and he sees where he said it's just like, let's say you were building a fence, and then all of a sudden the fencing stops and there's just these little sticks leaned to each other, and that's the border fence. So in other words, the fencing has just not been completed. And that's what the discussion has really been. And I do think it's unfortunate that the president started off his conversation about the border wall by saying we need to build a wall. I even have a sign. You guys have seen it up before on the shelves behind me. The Build the Wall signs from the Trump rally that was held here in Columbia, Missouri. And it was a national push. All of the rallies that he did during that period, people were given those signs. But it's really finish the wall. And again, I think this idea that people have ruled out a concrete barrier as something that is horrible and can't be put up, it's a testimony to really how deeply ingrained in people their opposition to President Trump is, because no one ever mentioned a concrete structure being a problem before President Trump mentioned it. When he said he wanted a big, beautiful 30-foot tall wall, that's when people started hating that idea, and not a minute before. So welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk about the murderous drug kingpin El Chapo being convicted. I watched a video, just a quick one, about what he's going to be facing in, he's going to go to one of those Supermax prisons that they always have, movies are made about people breaking out of Supermax and how impossible it is. Because he has broken out of prison twice before, he's going to be, imprisoned in what is considered to be an inescapable type of a situation there. But it's sad, and I know it's a weird thing to hear me, as hard as I am on drug trafficking, illegal immigration, open borders, and specifically the drug cartels. It's kind of weird to hear me say it's sad, but the video that they shared was it's a look at the conditions that he'll be living in. And in most prisons in the United States, prison inmates have access to television, they have access to libraries, they're not kept in solitary confinement unless they've done something awful, like they're repeatedly engage in violence and injure another inmate. Usually they have significant portions of their day where they are allowed to be outside and then also in contact with other people, and they eat together. And this is not the situation with him. He's going to be in solitary confinement 23 hours out of a 24-hour day. 23 hours a day he'll be in solitary. And a room that the only soft thing in there will be the thin mattress on the bed. And it's just like, when you look at the video of where he's going to be, it's unimaginable. Honestly, it's unimaginable that a person would be forced to live like that. And I know some of the people who were reporting back from, some of the reporters who were sharing from the actual trial were saying that when he showed up initially a few months ago when the trial first began, he was teary-eyed and bleary and really just, he didn't look like a drug kingpin. He didn't look like a scary person. But the reports of him are that he has, executed people by shooting them in the head and, done other horrible things to people who, in order to fight over a drug turf and to take over the control of different cartels. And other people have said that they're definitely not in the country that he comes from, in Mexico, and specifically in Centola, I think is the name of it, the city where he operated the cartel, and also some of the other places where he lived, and even the hometown where he grew up. They've said that he's built roads and he's done this and that, and so they ignore the violence that he's perpetrated because he's done things to improve the area. And they're saying now there'll be a whole nother war over his turf. But that brings us to the money that they've seized, billions of dollars, 14 billion, I think was last reported, that they have now of his money, and whether or not that money will be used to build a wall. And I'm pretty excited about the prospect of Ted Cruz, bringing his bill forward, although something tells me the Democrats would never go for it. You know what I mean? Like, they just can't go for it because it would be too much like right if they went for it. So today we're going to be speaking to Cassie Smedile. She's a national press secretary and spokesperson for the RNC. And we're also going to be getting into the kind of details, the gory details. If the Democrats succeed in getting the president to sign a bill that decreases the number of beds that ICE has to detain criminal illegal aliens, which districts do these criminal illegal aliens get released back into? They're being held in, centralized facilities now, but where will they be released? And we should, as American citizens, know every single line number. So the number, the prisoner's number, and where that prisoner's crime, what they're being held for, or where they're being released. Yeah, I said it. That's what we need to know. So we'll be getting into that as well. Right now, I want to talk to you about India Partners, and then we're going to get into the Daily Confession, which today is all about God's plan for your life. So I'm so excited to share that with you. India Partners is our partnership where we're providing days of safety to children who are growing up in Mumbai's red light district. And we're so grateful to those who have already partnered with us on this, providing a day of safety for $7.08. And we're asking you, if you have not yet partnered, please call the number. It's 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or go to afr.net. That's afr.net. And you can find all the information that's needed to quickly donate one day of safety, $7.08, or as many days as you feel led to give to provide safety for these kids. I want to listen to a testimonial from one of the children themselves and what these days of safety really mean to them. It's 3049.
तो मैं यहाँ से 2008 को यहाँ से
I don't remember much of my dad, but I do remember my mom. She was doing things I didn't like. When I was little, my mom brought different men over. These men were not nice, and they hurt my mom. This one man was very bad. One time, he did things with my mom and my sister, and then he pushed me down the steps. I rolled over several times and broke many bones. This scar here on my forehead, this scar is from that night. But after that night, my mom got my sister and me out. I came here, and my sister went to the girls' home. My mom decided that it just wasn't safe for us at our old home. Later, my sister and I found out that that man was the reason my mom is no more.
So these are kids who, through no fault of their own, are experiencing horrors that we would never want any child to experience. And here in our country, where admittedly we have a lot of different issues going on, but we are blessed in that we have many more social programs that help people in circumstances as dire as these in our country. And in Mumbai, India, this doesn't exist. And that's why India Partners is doing this amazing work of rescuing children in these red light districts and giving them the opportunity to have a safe place where they don't have to worry about being hurt or harmed or in any of the things that they're currently experiencing. Please call 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or go to afr.net to partner with us and provide a day of safety for $7.08 for a child in Mumbai's red light district. So now I want to pivot over to, and thank you for doing that. And so I want to pivot over to the Daily Confession. So I was thinking, sometimes I'm like, what am I going to talk about for the Daily Confession? And today I felt like immediately, as soon as I said, what am I going to talk about, to myself, like, I don't know if you guys talk to yourselves, but if you don't, you probably should, because talking to yourself can be kind of awesome. And so I immediately thought to myself, we're talking about God's plan for our life, because yesterday I was telling you all of the things that the Bible says about you that are awesome and amazing. It was a pick-me-up. It was a boost. It was a shot in the arm, a kick in the pants. It was exactly what we needed. And today, you're probably, if you're like me, you're like a little puffed up. You're like, yes, that was awesome. I know what God says about me. I'm here to get this thing done. I can do it. I can do all things through Christ. I'm revving. I'm ready to go. But maybe you're a little in the valley of decision. Maybe you weren't discouraged yesterday and you were like, yeah, thank you so much for the encouragement. But boom, what is it that what step am I supposed to take? I'm in a place where I need to go here or go here. I have two choices, or I have three choices, and I'm not sure what to do. Well, the Bible is very clear that we can actually go to God at any point with any problem and expect him to answer our request, not just to, some kind of vague feeling, but to actually answer and make it clear to us what he wants us to do. And so when we're in that area where we're like, I'm not sure, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that God is sovereign and he has a plan for our lives. And so I want to give you Philippians 1:9-11. It says, and this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. So this is Philippians. You've got a few things here to unpack. And so really quickly, I want to run down this. First of all, we have to, again, understand who we are in Christ. The Bible describes us as, the children of your youth are like arrows in the quiver. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full. The Bible also talks about us going out and making our mark for Jesus Christ. And then here in Philippians, we're told that we will be able to discern what is best and pure and blameless for the day of Christ when we are filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ and the glory and praise of God, which means we have nothing to fear, and that God's plan for our life is evident. We have only to walk in it, asking him first and then obeying, walking in obedience. All right, we'll be back with more after this.
Here's American Family Association President Tim Wildman.
Lynn Ingram and Jim Duncan, two Texans, support and believe in our ministry here at AFA and AFR.
We know more about the laundry business than anything else. We know a little bit about a lot of things, but we know a lot about the laundry and dry cleaning business.
They created a laundry detergent to sell to folks to support AFA.
We just want to be able to provide a product that can be used by AFA to support the ministry.
When you wash your family's clothes with Redeem Clean laundry detergent, you can take great satisfaction in knowing that you're supporting the vital work of the American Family Association. It's a unique way to increase your giving to AFA. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more about the Redeem Clean products when you visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Tiger Woods is a phenomenal golfer. He can do things with a golf ball that are just short of incredible. Although I love golf and I love to play golf, I will never be a fourth of the player that Tiger Woods is. I don't have what it takes. Even if I wore the same clothes and played with his clubs, I still couldn't pull it off. I could try to disguise myself to be him, but when I stood over that ball to hit it, the world would know that I was a fraud. Something like that happened in Acts chapter 19 of the book of Acts. The Apostle Paul had just performed some incredible miracles in Ephesus. Some were envious of him and decided, hey, look, we can do this. In fact, this might be quite lucrative. Listen to this account in Acts chapter 19, verses 14 and 15, when these 7 guys tried to cast out demons. 7 sons of a Jewish high priest named Sceva were doing this. But the evil spirit answered them, Jesus I know, and Paul I recognize, but who are you? Oops, an embarrassing moment. They had the image. They probably had followed Paul and the rest around and caught their mannerisms, checked out how they did things. They even used Jesus' name. We need to be careful not to exchange image for substance. We've got to be the real deal. There has to be a genuine, legitimate experience in our own souls with the living Lord of history. Not everybody standing with the Bible on TV or in an arena has the real power of God resident in their lives. Here's what I want you to remember today. We can't give what we don't possess any more than I can claim to be Tiger Woods. Search your heart. Make sure you've given your life to Christ.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you for making your home on American Family Radio. We really appreciate having you here. And I always appreciate when we have our next guest on the program. She's awesome. And I have so many questions about everything that's going on in D.C. right now. So it's perfect time to be joined by Cassie Smedile, National Press Secretary and spokesperson for the RNC. Cassie, thank you for coming on.
Hello. You're one of my most favorite people to talk to. So this is working out great.
This is actually working out totally great. Unlike how things are working out for El Chapo. His stuff's not working out great for him.
Oh, my gosh. I was reading, I don't know if you read the Bright email, the Federalist puts it out. It's like the skim for conservatives. And they were like, this is the greatest telenovela you haven't been watching. All of the play-by-play of his trial is crazy.
I mean, I haven't been getting that. I have to make a note to myself. The Federalist, the skim. Okay, I need that. Okay, so but what I have been reading about, and it's grim stuff. It's like totally grim stuff. Is what he's like. Like, he's a murderous thug. He's a killer. He's like scary pants all over. Like anything you've seen on TV, just, oh my goodness. Like there's no way to really articulate it for most of us, because we're not just in a very civilized and kind of high functioning society, but most of us live lives in which we're so detached from really any kind of crime at all, that when we see it in the movies, it's just something, it's just something. It's like something that's been objectified and also kind of sanitized, because in movies it's not even accurate as to what, drug lords are like and all of that. But this guy, he was like a demon, just trafficking drugs, killing people, doing whatever he wanted to do.
With a smile on his face. I mean, so smug. And to even the people who were testifying against him, the mistresses and all of it, who, were still professing their love, which you have to believe was out of straight fear for his network and retaliation. But it was just pretty crazy. And I think that, not to tie into all that we're doing here, but in talking about with immigration and border security and all of that, but it's the nth degree example of all of that, and hopefully it's an outlier example, but it is the reality that these people exist not too far away from our country, and they relish in the ability to completely make horror stories out of people's lives.
And so, Cassie, it does connect up, and, it's a part of the news that we're consuming, and it is something interesting, kind of like Americans do love to kind of delve into court cases. Like if there's a court case that becomes nationally prominent, we all like to kind of pull aside and take a moment and watch and, what's happened, and everyone discusses it. But this really dovetails in. This man has been able to be so successful trafficking drugs into America because we have an open border. He's been able to use our own laws against us and thwart our efforts to reduce his effectiveness. He's been largely successful, and he's made billions of dollars because of intransigence by both parties, but primarily Democrats. And his worst enemy is President Trump and what President Trump wants to do with our national sovereignty and our border.
Well, that's absolutely right. And the thing that was terrifying to me, you hear the El Chapo verdict come down. I thought, all right, well, that's him. But he has this whole network, a network of people who believe in what he's doing, or at least fear for their lives so much so that they're complicit in what he's doing. And those people are still out there, as you say, taking advantage of our laws and the loopholes in our laws, and wreaking havoc on our country and on our communities. And this drug trafficking, this is the thing that, as we talked about before, I'm from Missouri. I'm obviously not a border state, and yet because of all of the drug trafficking, that's what all of us have to be concerned about, because that's hitting every single community regardless of geography. Every community in America has been so heinously impacted by the opioid epidemic, and 90% of those drugs are coming across our southern border. We just had another seizure. Did you see they just seized several thousand pounds of marijuana in the last couple of days?
Yeah.
I mean, our guys are doing incredible work, but the point of the wall is so that they can focus their time and efforts on seizing that marijuana, seizing the network of El Chapo's and others' network that are just relentlessly taking advantage of our porous border and porous laws. So if we have a wall, then that's less time that they have to spend on these areas that are opened, and more time that they can spend zeroing in on this problem and putting an end to it. And as President Trump says, it has to start with the wall. And we've had a wall on hundreds of miles of our border for years. We've been repairing it and adding to it for years. This is nothing new. The only difference now is that President Trump wants it done, and that's why Democrats have changed their tune on it. But the facts haven't changed. The crisis has worsened. And unfortunately, every single day, the El Chapos of the world are with a smile on their face, all too happy to take advantage of our country and wreak havoc in our community and in our families.
So Cassie, you encapsulated that perfectly. But I've been saying here on the radio, And I got a couple emails where people were mad, but I was like undeterred because I do think I'm onto something here. Really, like when there's good and bad, right and wrong, black and white, the truth and lies, you have to pick one side. And with the drug trade and what they're doing, I mean, if you don't believe Cassie and I, just Google El Chapo and look up some of the things that he's known to have done to other human beings. And then come back. Don't go in uninformed. But I kind of put it like this. You have Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and all of the Democrats, and they're kind of advocating to permit El Chapo's successor and the other ones who are taking over the other drug cartels, because El Chapo's not the whole pie. He's like one guy. They're advocating for those guys to be able to continue to funnel drugs into this country and make billions of dollars off of the suffering of Americans, while the president, and I don't think President Trump's perfect, I don't worship him, but speaking of this issue specifically, the president is on the side of Americans who don't want to see 70,000 be the number of deaths next year due to opioid addiction and overdoses, et cetera, et cetera. Really, is there another side that I'm missing here, or because I'm really tired of people saying you don't have this right. I see it as really black and white and easy to kind of explain. You either are for the drug cartels dealing us drugs and selling us drugs into our country, or you're not.
I couldn't agree with you more. And this is also what's interesting, is that is such a practical argument to say we all agree that we have an opioid crisis in our country and a drug crisis in our country. That doesn't seem to be any issue on either side of the aisle. Everyone agrees with that. Okay. So now let's agree on how we treat people who are dealing with this disease of addiction. We all agree on that. Okay. Now let's talk about the source of these drugs and the opioids and the narcotics. Where are they coming from? Well, 90% are coming from our southern border, according to our brave men and women on the front lines who see them and seize them every day. 90% are on the southern border. Okay, so how do we stop that? Well, if you could give us more resources for this, if you could build a barrier here, that would allow more people to come. They're telling us all of these things that would be helpful. And now, all of a sudden, Democrats are saying, nope, that's wrong, we're not going to do it. So it's bizarre to me that they can agree and recognize the steps just along with the rest of us every step of the way. And then when you get to the source and how we could actually start to curb the issue by cutting off the supply, then no. Now it's back to politics as usual, and they won't do it. And that's what people need to know. Every single time a Democrat says abolish ICE, or every time they vote against funding for a border, or frankly every time they just aren't willing to talk about immigration reform as a whole, that is a Democrat saying, I don't care what is happening to you and your family right now, because it is happening. The 6 degrees of separation, somebody told me it's like 2 or 3 degrees of separation with the opioid epidemic. If we aren't someone, we all know someone who is suffering from this. And I mean, I don't have the words for it. It's horrific that we would have elected officials who can't connect that dot or refuse to connect that dot purely for political purposes.
And so it's devastating. And as you and I are talking about this, I know so when you say 3 degrees of separation, I think about the, dozens of states that we have this program broadcast into, and all the communities of Americans. And so, people have someone in their extended family who's suffering from this, or they know someone from their church or their school or their workplace who has a family member that's dealing with this. So you take that death toll, that carnage that people are seeing. Either they have a family member who's hooked on these drugs and desperately trying to get off, or they have someone who's, been felled by the overdose epidemic, which is, these drugs are not clean. They're laced with things, and people are getting killed. But then I hate to be Debbie Downer, but the subject matter is tough. There's also the people who are being sexually assaulted, kidnapped, driven over by drunk drivers, the robberies, the home invasions. All of this is also happening. So hundreds of thousands of Americans on a yearly basis experiencing criminal activity within this is our home where we live here together as Americans. And all of that could be greatly reduced if we were to simply say, we're sealing up our southern border. We still have, a process by which people travel, north and south between Mexico and here. Mexico is still a trading partner. We're not declaring war on them. But I don't know if you saw, there was one of the representatives, a Republican guy, was saying what we should do is we should actually declare the drug cartels, instead of transnational criminal organizations, we should call them terrorist organizations because of the death tolls. You can connect all these deaths to them. And it's much worse than terrorism right now in our country. We don't have that many deaths from terrorism as we do from this. And if the president were to do that, then Congress would be completely removed from the picture. He would be able to dedicate Department of Defense resources, and he'd be able to snuff out drug lords because they would no longer be criminals, subject to due process. They would be terrorists subject to, basically undeclared declarations of war, like how we do with the other terrorists, or we just drone them out of existence. What's the chance of the president doing that? I mean, it sounds like something viable, doesn't it?
Well, it does. That's the first I'm hearing of that thought. And when the way you lay it out, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that certainly I have no information if that's something that's been brought to the president's attention, but him saying, I'm going to solve this crisis at the border. I'm not taking my eye off of this, and I'm going to go by any legal means necessary to do this. I would imagine that might be something that eventually makes it on the list of options, because
I'm going to send you the link.
Thought, because
I'm going to send you the link to the story. But and I know you're super busy, and no, by no means do I mean you're going to, but I want to send it to you so you can see it, since we're talking about it. And the reason I'm bringing it up is just because we've talked about it a little bit on the show, and a lot of the listeners have called in and said, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't we treat this like that? Like the worst death toll, besides abortion, which is legal in this country. You're looking at deaths from like heart disease and stuff like that. We're fighting all of that. But this opioid epidemic, it's more people killed by that than there are by guns. And liberals certainly want to do something. We could save just one life. So if there were a way for the president not to have to deal with Nancy Pelosi, I know he's looking at everything in his toolkit, and I would want him to, kind of be aware of this one as well, this is actually in the law because he's the president, commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces.
And he gets to, by our Constitution, the safety and security of Americans is well within his job description. I think it is a fascinating thought. I would love for you to send it to me.
I will.
Push through the network. I don't know if I'll be the one that helps me get it there, but
I
would want to know more about it.
Yeah, you and your staff and your people can know about it, and you guys are super well connected, which I totally enjoy. Like it's good to know friends, to have friends who know other friends who are like, awesome. So that's how I view that. So now that we've got
wonderful,
we've got that whole thing going, and we just have a couple minutes left in this segment, and I wanted to ask you. I've seen a lot of people talking about the Green New Deal, and I even had some people saying, look, this Green New Deal thing is like a distraction. We know the Democrats don't want to build every building in America torn down and rebuilt. What is it that they're doing with the other hand while we're all paying attention to the silliness of the Green New Deal? Do you buy into that, or did they really just mess this thing up the way that it looks like they did?
Yeah, it's certainly a bad rollout that made them look really silly and disorganized, but don't mistake that amateur hour for this being, don't take that as a joke of a deal. This is what they want. Think about every issue that we've been talking about recently where not too long ago we would have thought these positions were just so far-fetched. Abolishing ICE. Who would have thought that would have caught on, maybe 5 years ago? What? No. Who would talk about that? And now that's part of the resist movement. Think about the conversation we're having about post-birth abortions in our country right now. That's something that even people who are pro-choice moderates have always thought late-term abortions were a bridge too far, and then we've come to find polls just this week which shows far majority of Americans, I think, and depending on how you ask the question, 76 to 80% of Americans find that extreme position on being able to abort a baby at its due date or even just after its birth is so extreme. And yet, that's part of the everyday conversation with Democrats in America today. So things that we think sound laughably extreme, do not take them for granted on it. they would love any opportunity they can to try and push this through, which is why I absolutely love that Mitch McConnell is trying to push a vote on the Green New Deal in the Senate, and the Democrat senators are raising Cain over it because they don't want to have to vote on it. But it's important that you see a vote. It's important that we have a record showing this thing that you and I out here in everyday America are laughing at because it just sounds so ridiculous, is very serious to them, so serious, in fact, that Kamala Harris has no problem saying she supports it. Neither does Cory Booker, neither does Elizabeth Warren. All of these 2020 hopefuls, the more well-known ones, are like all too happy to endorse it. So if it's a joke and if they don't really mean it, then why are they even taking the time to endorse it? So I think we actually have to be very careful and be very aware that this is absolutely where the mainstream Democrat Party is today, and people need to know that as they are making their decision to who they're going to vote for in 2020.
I agree with you 100%. I tend to think that they're much more brazen now, and stuff that looks crazy to us looks absolutely feasible to them, which is in and of itself, like, that's a whole nother hour of us, you and I, just wondering what's going on here. I'm Cassie Smedile, National Press Secretary and spokesperson for the RNC. Thank you for coming on today. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for always taking the conversation.
All right. Talk to you again soon. We'll be right back with more.
What does it take to be a sports success and a team player? Here's Pro Football Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy with today's Uncommon Moment.
When I think of the ultimate teammates, two names come to mind: Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison. This duo, who I had the pleasure of coaching for 7 incredible seasons, is the most prolific quarterback-receiver pairing in NFL history. But what a lot of people don't know is how hard they worked to make what they did look effortless. They put countless hours into practice, training, in the film room, and together they led the Colts to a Super Bowl championship. Their skill, work ethic, and their chemistry was truly uncommon. I'm so proud that Harrison was inducted into the Hall of Fame alongside me, and I have no doubt that Peyton Manning will join us as soon as he's eligible.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of Quiet Strength and the Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've seen God open up so many doors for us to help serve and love those who get affected by a natural disaster.
As the trees and the wind started crashing down around us, my wife was, of course, very diligently praying, Lord, please be with us.
Very simply, we do it because God commands us to love others.
I see these volunteers all as a gift from God.
And I'm just grateful they're here, helping out. It's a blessing.
If you're interested in becoming a part of what God's doing through 8 Days of Hope, please go to 8daysofhope.com, click on Get Involved, submit your email address.
I've noticed that whenever there's a time in my life when things might be a little gloomy, the number one thing that I can do is to go serve somebody.
And I would encourage anyone else to, it's worth it. Come out and do it next time if you did make it to this one, and the Father will really bless you in it.
Thank you so much for your prayers and volunteering with 8 Days of Hope.
From America's election headquarters.
For the last 3 cycles, Virginia has picked a Democrat for president, but the Commonwealth's 13 electoral votes could be up for grabs as dueling scandals continue to be a drag on Democratic lawmakers accused of sexual misconduct or racist behavior. Here's the University of Virginia's Dr. Larry Sabato.
Virginia has created a big problem for the eventual Democratic nominee.
President Trump tweeted this week, if the 3 failing polls were Republicans, far stronger action would be taken. But one potential presidential candidate thinks voters will forget Virginia because so many Democrats have demanded resignations in Richmond. Here's Congressman Eric Swalwell.
2020, I think, is going to be about, has our country lost, our moral compass? And if our leaders are standing up and saying, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, we're going to hold you to account.
In Washington, Peter Ducey, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We're not sure yet, to be quite honest, and I'm not really ready to focus on what could be in there. I'd like to focus on what is actually in there, and we haven't seen that yet. We've heard some rumors, and we've heard some reports. We've seen some reporting on exactly what could or could not be in there, but it doesn't jive with what we're hearing. It's not consistent with what we're hearing coming out of the conference committee. So until we actually see it, it's very difficult to comment on it. I will tell you the president obviously wants to protect the American people. He's been clear about what he wants. And so far, all we've heard from Democrats are a proposal that included letting people out of jail who are convicted criminals. Some of those include rapists and murderers. That's completely unacceptable. So if that kind of language is still in there, if they're going to stand by that particular proposal that ICE can't arrest criminals, and the ones that are in there that are in overflow have to be released, we've got a whole nother situation on our hands. And the only thing that's missing from the Democrat proposal, if that is still in there, in fact, is a proposal from them that tell us exactly which districts of their own that they'd like for us to put those criminals into, because that's just a ludicrous notion on its face. So until we actually see the language, it's very difficult to comment on something that that isn't in front of us.
And I want to make one more point. And that was White House spokesman Hogan Gidley, who we've actually spoken before. I believe it was at the Radio Row last year. He came on the program. I got to interview him live, and he's a really great guy. And he supplements the work that's done with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So it's wonderful to have him weighing in on behalf of the White House. And he's speaking about this idea where the Democrats have put it out there that they want to reduce the number of immigration customs enforcement beds that are available in which to house criminals. So not people who are thought to be criminals or may possibly be criminals or who have been maybe charged with something. We're talking about actual criminals here. Now, the former director of ICE actually has the numbers that the Democrats are putting forward in their proposal, and this is kind of staggering. It's stunning. It's like if you're driving, just keep your hands at 10 and 2, so steady on the wheel. And I don't want your blood boiling, but I want you to kind of prepare yourself for what you're going to hear. He's talking about the release of 30,000 illegal immigrants. If the Democrats get the wall deal that they proposed, it's number 3.
Look, I've been saying for almost a year that I don't think they're ever going to accomplish the abolish ICE that they've been saying they're going to do. But I've been saying what they're going to do, they're going to bankrupt ICE to make them ineffective. They'll take their money away so they can't do their job. I mean, the number they put on the table, like 32,000 cap beds, understand ICE is currently at 47,000, which means they're 15,000 over the cap. Now, we're halfway through the year. To get to that 32,000 by the end of the year, they're going to have to go 15,000 below 32. So that means if they're 15,000 above, they got to go 15,000 below. ICE will have to release 30,000 people from custody. 30,000. If you're in the country illegally, they're processing what we call expedited removal, and congressionally mandated, you have to detain them. So if ICE can't detain and reach the border crossers, not only are you back to catch and release, Border Patrol will be catching them and releasing them from the stations and not even give them over to ICE, which is a violation of the law.
So that's why Democrats, they want to put those ankle bracelets on them, right?
Ankle bracelets. Look, ankle bracelets, first of all, 1/3 of the people that wear ankle bracelets cut them off. Ankle bracelets do not equal deportations. If you look at how long, because once you get an ankle bracelet, you're on the non-detained docket, which means immigration court puts you on the backlog. So you're going to be in the country 7-8 years. So it may be cheaper per day for an ankle bracelet, but you're on the docket so long. If you would have been to detention, the average stay in detention is 37 days. It's far cheaper to detain somebody and remove them. You put them on an ankle bracelet, it costs a lot more money in the long run.
So allow that to soak into you for just a second. We're talking about the criminals, right? They're detained, and they're put if they're under the Obama implementation of this policy, the way the Obama administration interpreted this law and executed it, they would put an ankle bracelet on every single one of them and release them into the country. And fully 1/3 of them would remove the ankle bracelet, which means they disappear forever. There's no, unless they commit a crime and are incarcerated for something serious that they're not given a slap on the wrist for. And if they're not in a sanctuary state like Illinois or California, then they might come into contact with ICE again. But otherwise, they're out in the country doing whatever. And remember, I think one of the things that goes without saying that we kind of take for granted is that every time there's a crime that's committed, that it's solved, right? So we do have a good record of that here in this country. But if you look at us and compare us with some other countries, there are people who are very dissatisfied with our rate of, closing cases. And it also depends on where the crime happens. If the crime happens in an inner city, the likelihood of it being solved is much lower than if it happens in the suburbs. And it also depends on what region of the country you're in. But the assumption that every time a person is released on an ankle bracelet and they take the ankle bracelet off, this is an illegal immigrant, so they've already showed a propensity for breaking the law. They're in the country. If they break laws and they're not caught, then they're just breaking laws and not getting caught. Victims are going without having justice, and that person is still in the United States. So when we see, remember the numbers from yesterday, 42 million Latin Americans want to live here, 5 million plan on coming this year. We have all of the ones that are here now. Now no one uses 11 million anymore. Now they say 22 million. I've told you here many times on the show, I think the number is more like 38 million. I think there are just as many Hispanics here illegally as there are blacks in this country. That is unverifiable, which is why the president wants to have the Census Bureau ask the question, are you in the country legally? Because that will definitely give us a clear picture. First of all, a quarter of the apportionment that goes to the state of California would be erased immediately if those people were to answer honestly, because it's estimated that 1 out of every 4 people living in the state of California is in the country illegally. See, it gets real. That's why they fought that. That's why the Democrats fought that one so hard, because they don't want to lose the ability to get welfare benefits and checks from the federal government. They don't want to lose their House of Representative members or how, the apportionment of the census determines a lot of things that are really, really important in the big scheme of things, especially when you're talking about power. So and the other parts that we have to kind of unpack here, he says 30,000 illegal aliens would be released into the country. And notice how somehow the fluke of the law for us is that they don't get released at the border back into Mexico. They're released into America. This is what's wrong, which is what the president is trying to fix, which is why I don't understand why everybody is fighting him on it. I don't get that. So I want to give you guys, we already have callers? Awesome. Let's go to the phones. If you want to join us, it's 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Also, India Partners, we are working hard to provide 1,000 days of safety today through partnership with you, our listeners. That number that you can call to partner with us is 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or head over to afr.net. We appreciate your partnership and your listening and making your home here on American Family Radio. Let's go to the phones. We have Daniel in Oklahoma. Hey, thanks for holding on, Daniel. Thanks for calling in.
All right, thanks for taking my call. I think the whole thing, if we look at what Maxine Water says about it being total resistance, and it's total resistance to Christianity, total resistance to Trump, and total resistance to the Constitution. And putting this deal about the bad for the criminals is this to create chaos, hoping that Trump would not sign the bill and so they can blame it on him when they really don't want the bill signed. They don't care about another stop on the government. And also, I think when they threw away God out of the platform, they replaced the Bible with rules for radicals or rebels. That's all I have to say.
Daniel, dead on. Thank you for calling. Thank you for those spot-on comments. I tell you what, and no offense, I don't mean to offend you, but the truth is going to come out. You can't advocate for lawlessness and, the murderousness that's going on and then be like, yeah, because that's what God wants us to do. No, it isn't. Don't try that over here. Nobody believes that. Nobody is falling for that. Okay, Tommy in Ohio. Hey, Tommy, thanks for calling the show today.
How are you doing,
Good.
Dickie?
Good.
The government is I called yesterday about the Democratic president would build that wall. They would agree to $50 billion or whatever it is to build that wall, and it'd take them 25 years to build it if Democrats was in charge. But the thing is they don't want Trump to win at all, so they offering us $1 billion. They got to buy more than the gate. You know what I'm talking about here? They got to spend more than $1 billion.
Yeah, well, they do. And if this were any other issue, if this were Planned Parenthood funding, they'd say, oh, can we increase Planned Parenthood funding? Well, then we want to give Planned Parenthood $25 billion a year. So any woman in America can have an abortion for free. You just walk into Planned Parenthood, no questions asked, you get it done, and it's paid for by the taxpayers, and we'll allocate up to $25 billion for it. I can find at least 100 other things they would say that for. Do you remember, Tommy, I don't know if you were listening to the show, we were talking about the Rural Utility Service. The program costs taxpayers $8.2 billion a year and has no actual purpose. The Democrats were behind that one. Sugar subsidies, community development grants, the United Nations. We donate $10 billion to them a year. Amtrak, that costs us $9.7 billion a year. President Trump's asking for a one-time payment of $5.7 billion. He wants a total cost of $26 billion. All of these programs cost on a yearly basis. Unused real estate. We spend $15 billion a year on real estate, owning it, maintaining it, heating it, cooling it, but nobody's in it. It's just empty buildings. Foreign aid, we spend $50 billion a year helping to develop foreign countries. President Trump wants $5.7 billion. And fraud, waste, and abuse, which is estimated to cost taxpayers $137 billion a year in payment errors. And we're sitting up here arguing over $5.7 billion, which is less than 1/10% of 1% of the total annual federal budget. Oh, excellent comment. Fantastic. That's what we have to do, is we have to keep sharp on our toes and remember how to argue this thing. It's not so much about convincing Nancy Pelosi as it is about convincing constituents in districts that just sent Democrats back to Congress because those Democrats said they were moderate. People actually don't want this drama that we're seeing right now. Even Democrats who are, you know, maybe opposed on social issues to where I might be, they're not lawless. They're still people with families, and they want to see safety in America. Let's go to Michael in Michigan. Hey, Michael, thank you for calling the show.
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, I just had a comment. You played the recording of the White House rep where you made the comment that, you know, if we're going to release these 30,000, then what districts will we release them to? I just got a kick out of that. What would be their response? What would Pelosi actually start naming, or would any of the Dems actually name any areas that they would be okay with releasing these 30,000?
No, they wouldn't. They in their minds, this is rural America, because you know how they hate rural Americans. They hate the Midwest. They hate anybody who's not living in a big city and drinking Starbucks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Michael, I think what the president should announce is, if we're forced to reduce the number of beds, we will apportion, you know, a third of them into Nancy Pelosi's district, a third of them into Chuck Schumer's district, and a third of them into Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Any one of those people. Just send them on down the line and see what happens. An announcement like that from the White House, every single American would be like, pump the brakes. Where do we live again? Do we live in one of those districts? And the people who live in those districts would burn Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and AOC's phone lines to the ground. I mean, no questions asked. Absolutely. Hey, we have time for one more quick call. Don in Mississippi. Hey, Don, thanks for calling the show today.
Hi, Stacy. This is Don. You're 2 times my sister in Christ and sister in the Air Force.
Oh, yes.
For your service.
Thank you for your service.
Listen, thank you. I just wanted to mention Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution states that the United States shall provide protection for each of the states against invasion. Mm-hmm. And in the absence of the legislation, the executive branch will provide them also the protection against domestic violence. It sounds to me like all of our congressmen on the left are violating their own oath. And if you look it up at House.gov and Senate.gov, they take the same oath you and I did to protect the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And all they want to do is change it and ignore it.
You got a good point there. I think we have other remedies, and we just have to access them. And if there's anybody who'll do it, Don, I think it's Donald Trump. Not because he's the most amazing person in the world, or, you know, that I worship him. Oh, far from it. But I think he's more single-mindedly focused on this than anyone else. I want to give you one more time the number to India Partners. It's 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or AFR.net. India Partners has a fantastic record of passing on the majority of what you're giving to these kids and creating a safe place for them so that they don't have to experience the horrors of their moms working in the arena of prostitution. And it is something amazing that we get to do to partner with them. And I'm so grateful for every one of you who have already given. If you have not, go to afr.net. It's so quick and easy. I love the way we have it set up so that you can get in and get out and get back to your day. And I want to thank you for being here for this portion of the program. God bless you from the Heartland. See you tomorrow.
Is that alternative radio network because we choose to infuse Jesus in everything we do.
We count it a blessing to be able to speak with integrity and to speak honestly on the issues.
Thank you for joining us, partnering with us, being a part of
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk, so that we can stand for the gospel.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump says he's not expecting the government to shut down again. That's according to the Associated Press, which calls it a signal that the president is leaning toward accepting a budget deal that involves a fraction of the money he requested for a border wall. The president made these remarks in the last hour from Washington.
Every American in every community and from every walk of life has a right to live in security and to live in peace. That is my highest priority as president.
Well, a fiery exchange today between Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota and U.S. Special Envoy to Venezuela, Elliott Abrams. This was at a House Foreign Affairs Committee meeting, and Omar began by addressing Abrams as Mr. Adams.
Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question. That was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation.
As we have reported on AFN, Representative Omar has been in the headlines for expressing anti-Israel views. While she has issued what some have considered an apology, she tweeted in 2012 that Israel has deceived the world, her words. She has more recently stated that she used unfortunate words. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants a vote on the Green New Deal. The resolution or framework from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey aims to combat what they call man-made climate change by seriously overhauling how we live, work, and travel. Republicans and other critics argue it's everything from ridiculously expensive to government overreach or both. Chris Pandolfo of Conservative Review likes the idea of a Senate vote.
The Republicans in Congress should be exposing the Democrats and their radicalism at every opportunity. So if you're going to take the Green New Deal resolution that they wanted to put forward in the House, you're going to put it up for the Senate for a vote, you're going to show that these people really want to fundamentally transform the American economy with government power, and they want to do it in a 10-year time frame.
Pandolfo adds that one thing a lot of people are getting wrong is they're focusing too much on the fact sheet, or FAQ, that Ocasio-Cortez released that he says was really inaccurate and poorly put together.
A lot of that stuff in the FAQ was not actually in the House resolution. So if McConnell is going to bring the actual House resolution up and make points in the bill that was introduced debatable in the Senate, I think that's a good move.
Democrats are critical of McConnell's push for a vote. Senator Markey tweeted Tuesday that this is not a new Republican trick, adding by rushing a vote on the Green New Deal resolution, Republicans want to avoid a true national debate and kill our efforts to organize. In final news this hour, residents in a remote part of Kentucky are getting prepared to defend themselves because there's no law enforcement. Jim McKay explains.
Lock your homes, load your guns, and get a dog. That's the message from Martin County Sheriff John Kirk at a recent fiscal court hearing, saying his sheriff's office has been owed a payment of over $150,000. The problem? A fund that has been helping out coal-producing rural counties has dried up in eastern Kentucky by some 80%. Started running dry back in 2012. He said until the office is paid, he can't run the thing out of his own pocket. Without the local sheriff's office, residents now have to rely on the Kentucky State Police, which may only have one patrolling officer in the county of 12,000 residents every 8 hours. Jim McKay, Fox News.
That is the news for this hour. For more information, visit onenewsnow.com.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today, and you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers, weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It's exactly what we've been saying all along. We're glad that they finally caught up. It's sad. It's hurtful for the country that it's taken 2 years to get there. We have been saying all along that there was absolutely no collusion. And I think it's time for everybody to be able to move on and move forward.
Well, I'm not going to be disappointed in the president. I'm disappointed in Congress. I mean, the president wants to keep the government open. If he uses this as a vehicle, so be it.
Democrats control the House, Republicans control the Senate. Donald Trump is the president. This legislation is a product of trying to find common ground.
The conference committee has done its job. It's forged a bipartisan agreement that would keep government open through September, as well as provide additional border security.
We'll see what the final package looks like, and the president will make a determination on whether or not he's going to sign it. But you can rest assured the president promised he was going to build the wall, and he's going to deliver.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Okay. So, yeah, welcome back to the program. Thank you for being here today. We have another great guest for you this hour. We're going to be speaking to Jeffrey Katz. He has a really interesting perspective on why Ralph Northam should resign. And I know this is really not like we don't have a lot of people. I don't see a lot of people advocating for him to stay in place, but he's dead-ending himself there. He's like entrenching himself. And we have options, obviously, as people. We could continue to press for him to resign. And, you know, there's things that the Virginia legislature could do. But it's really the people who have to stand up and say that they're opposed to what he's doing. And I think that is being offered here by Jeffrey Katz is one that you'll find interesting. He's coming from a totally different side of things or you know, perspective, and he's written a book as well. So we'll talk to him about that. We're also going to be delving into your calls. Call in. Join us, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. I was looking at Facebook a little bit ago, and it was showing me reminders of how last year I was at the White House reception for Black History Month. And it turns out I was invited again this year. I think I might have said earlier this week that I wasn't. I'm blaming my overfull email box for me missing that. I get so many emails on the White House press list that it was in amongst those, and I hadn't had a chance to catch up on what they were doing at the White House, and I missed it. So I saw the invitation. It looks like I'm going to trek out to Washington, D.C., and I'll get to see my mom and dad while I'm there and go to the White House reception again, and hopefully this time get to shake the hand of President Trump. Who knows? Who knows what will happen? But we're also, obviously, we have to talk a little bit more about this Green New Deal. And I find it so disturbing that we're even having all of this chat about the Green New Deal, but we are. And we can't ignore it. We can't bury our heads in the sand. We have to deal with it. And so Mitch McConnell says he's going to get the Democrats on the record as to whether or not they support eliminating air travel, eliminating any use at all of fossil fuels, et cetera, et cetera. He wants to get them on the record because a lot of them are running for Congress or for president. They're running for the presidency, and the American people need to know who they're voting for. So here he is. I thought it was pretty funny. I always find him amusing. I know everybody says, he's Lord Vader, he's this, he's that. I get all that, but I find him amusing because of his demeanor when he's saying these things. It's almost as if he's laughing under his breath a little bit, which is it's interesting. Here he is, number one.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've brought with me Chairman Shelby to make a statement about the agreement that's been reached. Let me say, first of all, however, I've noted with great interest the Green New Deal. And we're going to be voting on that in the Senate. We'll give everybody an opportunity to go on record and see how they feel about the Green New Deal.
He says, see how they feel about the Green New Deal. He's got a very dry sense of humor. Did you get what maybe it's just me. Maybe I just hear things that aren't there, but I think he was trolling a little bit right there. So now I want you to, I told you before, get your hands at 10 and 2 on your steering wheel and be careful. Now I want you to not have any liquid in your mouth. If you're drinking coffee or sipping your water bottle, you might want to take a last gulp before you hear this next one. It's Representative Liz Cheney, and she's got a group of people in front of her testifying on climate change. She starts to ask them some questions, and that's when it gets so funny. Here it is. It's number 2.
So let me ask you then, are there any other witnesses on the panel who do support the Green New Deal? Nobody supports the Green New Deal on this panel. Interesting.
I support many of the policies and recommendations in the Green New Deal.
I see.
Specifically, the support to make sure that any climate solution strategy is centered in equity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Farley. I appreciate that. Reclaiming my time, I would just say that I think it's going to be crucially important for us to recognize and understand when we outlaw plane travel, we outlaw gasoline, we outlaw cars, I think actually probably the entire U.S. military because of the Green New Deal, that we are able to explain to our constituents and to people all across this country what that really means. And even when it comes down to something like air travel, which the frequently asked questions say they want to eliminate within the next 10 years, that means that the government is going to be telling people where they can fly to and where they can't. And I would assume, I guess that means our colleagues from California are going to be riding their bicycles back home to their constituents. Thank you very much. I yield back.
So if that wasn't enough for you, if you need the whole bowl of fun, so just, you'll find that I already posted on Facebook and I tweeted it out. Listen to the whole thing. So she goes through this thing with these panelists where she asks them one by one how they appeared at the committee. So did they fly? Did they drive? Whatever. Some of them drove, some of them flew. Then she asked them if they oppose certain parts of the Green New Deal. And of course they acted like they didn't know it. And one of them even said, I'm just not here to talk about the Green New Deal. I'm here to talk about climate change, but I support the premises of the Green New Deal. And then that's when she just lit into them. And I think it's fantastic when you get to put people on the record with what they believe, because I find it really interesting. Like when you talk to a conservative or a Christian about an issue, like the pro-life issue, would you be okay with, adoption? Would you be okay with the government subsidizing adoption if there's less abortion and there are more babies born and people don't want them in there? Most Christians would say, yep, I'm fine with that. would you be okay with a check mark on your taxes where you could designate a certain amount to go to adoption funds to help people get through the process to make sure that kids don't sit so long in foster care? Yep, I would totally be for that. When you talk to Democrats about their policies, like, remember the video? I think it was Ami Horowitz who said, he asked people, when we talk about refugees coming into the country into large numbers, what if we could get 1,000 or 1,500 refugees here in your town, and we could get them here by, the end of this month? Would you be happy with that? And the guy, so he's talking to this guy. It's kind of a hipster, kind of, metro guy. He's tall, kind of got the longish hair. He's got on, what looks like expensive clothes, and he's got a cup of to-go coffee in his hand and a laptop in a case. And he says, well, I think that as many refugees as want to come to America should be able to come here. And he said, oh, okay. Well, what if we could bring 1,500 here to your town, right here to this town, by the end of the month? We just bring them straight here. And he said, well, no, I don't know about that. And Ami Horowitz said, why? Why don't you know about that? He said, well, that sounds like a lot. He said, but you just said we should have an unlimited number of refugees coming into the country. And he said, yeah, but I don't know if a number that big would work here. This is not a large place. That's what he said. He said, it's not actually a large place, and it might overwhelm our resources. He said, so don't you think about that for the rest of the country? And the guy actually said, maybe you've got a point. And then he kind of just turned and walked away as if to say, like, this is getting a little too hairy for me. So I find it interesting that when you approach someone on the political left about doing something, that the efficiency or the efficacy of doing something that they're advocating for, and then you bring it down to their level and say you want to do it in their town, their workplace, et cetera, they're usually opposed to it. They're fine with it on the national level. Dump all the refugees, dump all the illegal aliens, anybody you want, just dump them in the country, and, it'll work itself out. But if you say we want to put them here in your community, then it becomes a problem. And it's the same thing that we heard. Callers were so astute, and they framed it so perfectly and succinctly. We have the best callers. What happens, as Hogan Gidley asked, will Dems tell us into which congressional districts we should release the illegal aliens? That's where the rubber meets the road. And I don't think we should let that sentiment go. You got to take that sentiment to its natural conclusion, and you have to ask Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, who coincidentally, she doesn't live in her district. Maxine Waters lives in a mansion. She doesn't live in the district she represents, which has coincidentally also had negative repercussions from her being its representative. It's not better than it was when she started. It's worse economically. How about any of them? And not just the ones who live in California, where it's a sanctuary state and they probably already have some illegals there. No, I'm talking about some of these people who live in these districts that, these are nice districts. These are areas that are, thriving middle-class enclaves. Some of them thriving upper middle class enclaves. What would your constituents say if you decided, well, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we show how dedicated we are to this concept. We're going to bring in illegal aliens and we're going to put them right here. What do you think happens at that point? For me, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be, the analogy for the Star Wars is these aren't the droids they're looking for. I bet you it wouldn't be the droids they were looking for. Nobody wants the actual policies that they're advocating for in America at large to come home to roost in their own neighborhood. And I don't want that to be the only reason why it's a bad idea, but it certainly is indicative of whether or not it truly is a good or bad idea. We see the same thing with liberals and school choice. They do not want school choice. They're all about, kowtowing and putting tax dollars to, quote unquote, diversity. But when it comes to actual diversity and giving something up, they're just like everyone else, primarily interested in the betterment of their own family and making sure that they don't lose anything. That's a human instinct. Nobody gets blamed for wanting to take care of their family and wanting their kids to be in a AAA rated school, or not wanting the makeup of your school to change radically when you paid so much money to buy a house or rent a place to be in that school district. But the Republicans put their money where their mouth is. School choice. That means kids can come into empty spaces, and the changes to that school district, That's a part of the pie. It's giving kids access to a better education, because a better education is a path away from the grammar school to prison pipeline, and it's a pathway away from the kind of negative outcomes that we see in so many communities where kids are literally, they're getting jumped into gangs and they're going in there selling drugs and doing all that stuff because they can't keep up in school. They can't read, they can't do math at grade level, and they know it. That's the worst of it, is that these kids know it. They know it even better than their parents. They know how far behind they are. They know how they're not keeping up with the class. And at the point where they decide, you know what, I just can't take this anymore. I can't keep going to school. I have no idea what's going on there, and I can't keep getting suspended and getting in trouble. I'm just going to stay home today. I'm just going to hang around over here. I'm just going to go down with, you know, this one or that one who says they have something for me to do and I can earn some money during the day. And then before you know it, they've been arrested a few times, and then before you know it, they've been to juvenile detention, and then before you know it, they're in real prison. And all of that could have been stopped by school choice, which the Democrats oppose and Republicans are for, which coincidentally means that the Democrats actually oppose black kids getting a better education, and the evil white racist Republicans are actually for it. Isn't that funny? Doesn't sound at all like what we're told. We're told that all of the evil white racist Republicans are the ones who are trying to keep black kids down and send them to prison. Yet the Republicans are the ones who are promoting school choice, not shutting down school choice in areas like President Obama did. He's shut down the DC Opportunity Program the minute he was able to. And all those kids got tossed off, instead of letting them continue to matriculate so they could change their lives and change the outcomes that were really right down the pipeline for them. When we get back, we're going to have Jeffrey Katz. Stay right there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, our June tour of Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon is almost full, and September will be full before long. So if you want to go with us on one of these spiritual heritage tours in June or September, please check out the information now at spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com. You know, one of the places we go is the Arlington National Cemetery. We usually do that on Friday morning, and that is just a majestic place. It's hallowed grounds for us as Americans. It's there we'll see the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. That's just one of the places we see on one of the days we are in Washington, D.C. If you want more information on the Spiritual Heritage Tours, go to spiritualheritagetours.com.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Nicholas Phillips recently wrote about what he called the sham of American centrism. He tried to explain why former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz would fail as a presidential candidate. While doing that, he cites a report from the Voter Study Group that helps explain the 2016 presidential election and may even predict the 2020 election. The study plotted a public opinion survey of 2016 electorate along an XY graph. The x-axis represents economic views. The y-axis represents social views. Voters who are social conservatives and economic conservatives are in the upper right-hand quadrant. Voters who are liberal on both social and economic issues are in the lower left quadrant. Howard Schultz, who is a social liberal but a fiscal conservative, would be in the lower right quadrant, where a mere 3.8% of the electorate can be found. Those who voted for Donald Trump were in both the upper left and upper right quadrants. He appealed to both traditional conservatives and populists. By contrast, those who voted for Hillary Clinton cluster mostly in the lower left quadrant. These voters were very liberal both on social issues and economic issues. And I think this illustrates why so many of the announced Democratic presidential candidates are promoting very liberal ideas. Those who voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 are uniformly liberal on social and economic issues, often to the extreme. They will be the ones who will select the next Democratic presidential candidates in 2020. This voter study group graph might actually become quite useful in predicting both the Democratic presidential nominee and even the eventual winner of the 2020 presidential election. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Thank you for being with us. Welcome back to the show. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jeffrey Katz. He has written this book, fantastic book, The Secret Life, a book of wisdom, in which he directly ties Maimonides, I'm messing up that name, the teachings to the issue of whether or not Ralph Northam should resign. Jeffrey, thanks for joining the show today.
Pleasure to be here with you, Stacey. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm butchering the name. How do I pronounce this name, which I should be able to, but I think I just tore it up.
That's okay, Stacey. It's Maimonides.
Maimonides, okay.
A Maimonides and your Maimonides.
Okay, Maimonides. So how do the teachings of Maimonides tie up to whether or not Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, he's had a really rough couple weeks, should resign or not?
Right. Well, Maimonides spoke to so many applicable things, one of which was the question of forgiveness, which is really the question that's posed with what Ralph Northam did and whether he should resign or not. So Maimonides taught briefly that on an interpersonal level, if someone did something wrong to you and asked for forgiveness, you should certainly be quick to forgive. But for someone like a public official who's a role model, the standard is a little bit different. And Maimonides taught that one has not earned full forgiveness or cannot have full redemption until he's actually Stacey back in the situation, the identical situation he was in when he committed his mistake or sin, if you will, and he chooses another direction at that point. So, translated into what Northam did, basically, you'd have to look at what he's done since those decades ago when he had these blackface incidents, and you'd have to ask the question, has he soothed race relations? Has he promoted the African-American cause? And has he tried to make, the lot of African-Americans better in this country? And looking at the last election that he was in, where he ran, these ads, if you recall, Stacey, where he really so opportunistically used race, basically running these ads which painted supporters of his opponent as vicious racists. So he really showed himself as someone not very interested in promoting racial relations, but really just opportunistically using them for personal advantage. So he basically failed the test, and should resign by that standard of Maimonides.
So Maimonides put forward, it's kind of like it's basically a series of steps, and when you're in you have the opportunity to kind of make the same choice again. A changed person, a person who said, "Hey, I'm sorry," and they really mean it, they would choose differently than they did originally. And that's actually kind of commonsensical. A person who continues to make the same transgression over and over and over again and apologize is probably not really apologetic. They're just lying and trying to deceive you. But with Ralph Northam, the issue that he has where he doesn't feel like he needs to resign and he's repetitively had these issues also points to him not being the kind of person with enough introspection to be able to actually make the decision that needs to be made, which is that he should step down.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Stacey. Maimonides, just to give your listeners a little bit of background, one of the greatest minds of the past 1,000 years. He was a religious thinker, a rabbi, a philosopher, of the leading physician in Egypt of his time. He was the court doctor to the Sultan Saladin in Egypt. He was an astronomer. He was really a Renaissance man, hundreds of years before the Renaissance. And, he's someone who, up to now, in order to study his ideas, which are really transformational, one would have to go to some academy or a university. What I did was his ideas, Maimonides' ideas, touched me so profoundly. I thought it was important that they be accessible to everybody. So I basically wrote a book which very simply lays out his main ideas. It gives the secret of charity, the secret of justice, the secret of unconditional love, the secret of a higher calling, and the secret of resilience. And the benefit And like you said, Stacey, it's action that Maimonides is really concerned with. And he really shows us how through actions we can get beyond our daily routines and off the merry-go-round and really make our lives fun and meaningful journeys that are really worthwhile.
So, and your blurb on the book, and I have it up on Amazon.com, it's The Secret Life by Jeffrey Katz. And in the blurb you say, he's one of the wisest men of all times. It's the time of the Bible. He's the only man to be celebrated by the three major Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. His name is Maimonides, a philosopher, rabbi, physician, a religious thinker, and logician. Today, the sage is considered among the greatest thinkers. And so you're talking about taking a philosophical view to problems that really, it's not just Ralph Northam that has a problem here. Obviously, the Attorney General under him has an issue with, dressing up in ways that are now considered to be offensive by some in the mainstream media and politics. And then you also have the second in command there, the lieutenant governor. He's got, Justin Fairfax, he's got a couple of allegations of sexual impropriety against him. How would the same teachings apply to Fairfax and the Attorney General, who are also experiencing these kind of, they're all in a state of chaos?
Right. Leaders, clearly leaders have a special responsibility and really need to step up to the plate. And what these leaders have done is really, in many ways the opposite of leadership. Not only by virtue of their past actions, but like you mentioned before, Stacey, the lack of introspection and kind of self-evaluation and so forth. And those are important ideas that Maimonides points us to. For example, much of us in our society now, we're spending more and more of our day reacting just to all of the information that bombards us in every direction, on every screen we pass, competing for our attention. And most of that information is trivial stuff. So many of us are spending more and more of our days really just responding to and dealing with and managing this trivial stuff. Maimonides urges us to lead a secret life. Sometimes when you hear a secret life, it can conjure up something tawdry or maybe even illegal. But Stacey, not all secret lives have a dark side. Maimonides implored us to lead a secret life of goodness, whereby we choose what Maimonides would call, we develop and find our own individual perfections, our ultimate purpose, game-changing goal in life, our own higher calling, if you will. And it's that really transforms our lives. And then we do this in secret first. First, we build ourselves up as sovereign individuals who have a spirituality and a great integrity from within. And then, because it nourishes these good things that we do, that we keep to ourselves, nourish our souls from the inside out, then we share those with our family, and we develop relationships based on unconditional love, which was an amazing thing. And Maimonides was a great pioneer in the field of unconditional love and shows people how to develop those kind of unbreakable bonds with your children and grandchildren. And then once one has done that, one then goes out to the larger community and pursues his or her higher calling there. It's really an amazing formula for not only a secret life, if you will, but incredible secret benefits that accrue to the practitioner of it that are really transformational for people.
So how does this, because you did mention in the blurb for your book that he's been celebrated by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. How does this practice of a secret life, of improving yourself and it's everything that you've described, how does that dovetail in with Christianity?
You say, how does that dovetail in with Christianity?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's because aren't the religions, Christianity, doesn't Christianity really teach, like other, like Judaism and Islam to some extent, about making yourself the best person you can be in terms of devoting yourself to God, and also devoting yourself to worship, and also devoting yourself to others. So, Maimonides lived at a time when it was during the golden age of Islam, when you had some important tolerant and moderate Muslim thinkers as well. That's why the three religions kind of came together at that time. But, Maimonides looked for wisdom from whatever source it came. And he was attacked in his own time because he looked to Greek philosophy for some wisdom. And he said, look, I will look at truth no matter what source it comes from, unlike kind of the situation in Washington, D.C. today.
So what he's teaching doesn't stand in opposition to what Christians believe in the Bible is I guess the central question that I'm seeking to find out about.
Oh, completely. No, he is very consistent. As a matter of fact, Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologica and in his major works took a lot of ideas and continued the work of Maimonides. Maimonides really was a foundational work for St. Thomas Aquinas. So the two really went, Maimonides and St. Thomas Aquinas really went hand in hand, because Maimonides basically took the wisdom of the West and wisdom of Greece, if you will, and synthesized it with Judaism as a religion. And then St. Thomas Aquinas did a similar thing with Christianity. So the two works are very much consistent with each other, of course, except for the differences between Judaism and Christianity, themselves. They each had to deal with those unique aspects of it.
Fantastic. Well, I found the information that you sent out about, and it gives additional reasonings and additional ways to think about how Ralph Northam and the others who are experiencing similar circumstances to him, how they can actually, it's a way of looking at yourself and saying, look, I've done something that's wrong, but have I done this just this one time, or is this repetitive with me? Am I sincerely apologizing or not? And I don't know that Ralph Northam actually has the ability to look at himself that way or to ask questions like this of himself, but it is instructive for people who are thinking, on any situation, I've done something wrong, or people are saying I've done something wrong. Have I done this in the past? In the past, when I've apologized, have I turned away from this behavior? It's an interesting line of thought that you're presenting, and it sounds like it definitely takes more thinking and more it's just stepping away from the situation and actually saying, pause here, forget about what the ramifications are for me politically. What does this mean for me that I've done this? And I don't think any politicians are engaging in that.
Right. And, Maimonides, like I said before, Stacey, also is a great pioneer in the field of unconditional love. And those principles also can be combined with those of the higher calling and charity and the introspection and forgiveness that we were talking about. And really, people with their significant others, especially in light of Valentine's Day, I really would urge people to read the book with their significant others. I think they will find it will be incredibly uplifting for their relationship and will really elevate the tone of the love relationship that they have. Again, my book, The Secret Life, a book of wisdom.
Jeffrey Katz, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for coming on to talk about your book, The Secret Life by Jeffrey Katz. And it's the entire title is The Secret Life, a book of wisdom from the great teacher. And it was released January 22nd, 2019, so it's new. Jeffrey Katz is the author and guest today on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Stacey.
All right, talk to you again soon. Have a great week. I thought that was an interesting premise, which he's saying take a step back and think about the actions that you've taken. I know there's a lot more to the book than just that one particular thing, but it's connected up to the story with Ralph Northam. And I happen to believe, after listening to Ralph Northam, Governor Northam's interview with Gayle King, that he really doesn't think he's done anything wrong. He doesn't think that there's anything really wrong with the blackface pictures or whatever from his yearbook, whatever all that was. And to me, that's like secondary to his statements about, as a physician, giving a woman the opportunity to decide to kill a baby after the baby's already been born. And I know he wants to take what he said and kind of patch it up and, make it palatable. I didn't really say that, or that's not exactly what I meant. I get that. That's behavior of, psychopaths behave like that. They say one thing to you and then they gaslight you and say, well, you misunderstood what I meant. I don't think we did. I think we heard the audio and we heard him say that he would, the baby would be born and made comfortable and kept warm on the table or something like that. And then, the mom and the doctor would discuss whether or not the baby could get to live. That's not something we're misunderstanding. I think we're getting it pretty clear. So he's, it's so distasteful. Honestly, it's so utterly disgusting and distasteful, and so goes against his Hippocratic oath and the things that he swore to uphold when he became a physician. I just, again, it's often, when you think about it, it's often kind of stunning that people are just running around acting like this. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So we have been partnering up with India Partners this week, and I want to give you, 3:39. We're not going to have time to listen to any India Partners audio, but we will have time when we get back from this break. And we're also going to be talking about the collusion conspiracy against with the Trump campaign and the Russians. Did they find anything? The Senate Intelligence Committee has come out with their report, and they're saying no. I find it difficult to believe that the Senate Intelligence Committee would say there was no collusion and that Mueller would say that there was some. This is a precursor to the Mueller report coming out and vindicating the president. That's not what Mueller's there to do, but that's what's going to happen because the president's innocent. So we'll talk about that when we get back. Stay right there. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. America's unconstitutional practice of declaring babies born to citizens of foreign countries has become a magnet for lawbreakers. A group of so-called travel agents operating in California has been busted for advertising and selling Chinese women trips to the United States to give birth to their children so they can be American citizens. It's called birth tourism, and 19 people have just been charged in 3 different schemes originating out of Southern California. In recently unsealed indictments, the Justice Department alleges the defendants coached Chinese customers on how to pass U.S. consulate interviews by claiming their stays would last no longer than 2 weeks, and suggesting that they wear loose clothing to conceal their pregnancies. This is yet another example of how indecent our current immigration laws are to American taxpayers. These Chinese maternity tourists get citizenship, we get their unpaid medical bills. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Oh, what's that song we used to sing? Amazing Grace. It was one of them where we sang, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound.
That saved a wretch like me.
They took the word wretch out. Many people took the word wretch out. They said, don't say that. That's offensive. But without Jesus, you are a wretch.
Don't miss Bishop E.W. Jackson and The Awakening. Weekday mornings at 9 Central on Urban Family Talk.
It's Fox Wheels.
Ford is the first automaker to work with Gravity Sketch, a 3D virtual reality tool that's already available in the UK that enables designers to create a vehicle's cabin around us in a more human-centric car, truck, or SUV design, with a 360-degree view of a vehicle as it's being created.
The best example I might give is if you are sitting in a chair and that chair is the driver's seat and you start sketching an interior, you're literally designing from the customer's point of view.
Though Ford design manager Michael Smith also says,
we still sort of are going to operate on the percentiles to make sure that we're designing for the maximum number of people, right, who are potential customers.
Across 5 global Ford design studios, dozens of interior and exterior designers are now experimenting with Gravity Sketch for workflow feasibility and its potential, and perhaps easing future complaints in the legroom department. That's Fox Wheels. I'm Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
After 2 years and interviewing more than 200 witnesses, the Senate Intelligence Committee has not uncovered any direct evidence of a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. That's according to sources on both the Republican and the Democratic side of the aisle, Hallie. And careful viewers and readers will note that Senator Richard Burr, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee who leads this probe, essentially said that in an interview with another network last week. But what I've been doing since then is checking with my sources on the Democratic side to understand the full context of his remarks, because that was essentially a partisan comment from one side. But this is a bipartisan investigation, and what I found is that the Democrats don't dispute that characterization.
The Democrats don't dispute the characterization. In fact, major news organizations have reported on the Senate Intel Committee finding no collusion. I get it that people want what they want. They want to be able to say, hey, the president's guilty. People want to be able to keep the conversation going because the Russia deal is super important. It's what they've been hoping would be used to oust the president. Now they'll go, they'll go real slow, and they'll lay the groundwork for impeachment, and they'll try to bring impeachment proceedings to drag down the president's approval rating. And that may or may not be effective. I just encourage people to remember that we're required to judge and make our decisions based on what is true and factual, and we're required to use as our sounding board, our meter, is the Word of God. So anyway, here we are with Democrats panicking over the possibility of them having to actually be on the record about this Green New Deal stuff. So the massive government takeover that we've been discussing on the show, also known as the Green New Deal, has prompted Mitch McConnell, we heard that audio a little bit ago, to bring this forward for a vote. Well, Democratic Senator Ed Markey, who jointly introduced the Green New Deal last week with Socialist Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, claimed that McConnell allowing a vote on the bill was Republicans' way of secretly sabotaging it. Now, how does him saying everybody who is for it or against it, come on down, let's vote, how's that a sabotage? It's a sabotage because they don't want to be on the record. They just like talking about nonsense. He said, don't let Mitch McConnell fool you. This is nothing but an attempt to sabotage the movement we're building. He wants to silence your voice so Republicans don't have to explain why they're climate change deniers. I'll tell you why Republicans are climate change deniers, because there's nothing to deny. Climate changes, global warming and global cooling are just wealth redistribution schemes, and that's it. That's all. I mean, that's all they've got. They just want to take money from rich countries and give it to other countries that feel like they deserve it more. And the Democrats are fine with that because they've got ways around. When you're in the ruling class, you don't have to worry about your money being taken. They're enriching themselves in Congress, and they're enriching themselves with these deals. It's the American people who lose out on the Paris Climate Accord. Trillions of dollars of American wealth and jobs being frittered away under a deal that only the most developed westernized nations would have to actually kowtow to. The worst polluters like China and Pakistan and Russia would be off the hook. So he says, Mitch McConnell wants this to be the end, but this is just the beginning. Markey continued, this isn't a new Republican trick. By rushing a vote on the Green New Deal resolution, Republicans want to avoid a true national debate and kill our efforts to organize. We're having the first national conversation on climate change in a decade. We can't let Republicans sabotage it. Why am I reading it in that kind of weird, almost drunken voice? Because he tweeted it out, so we don't know what his voice sounds like, so I'm just giving him that voice. Also, that voice seems kind of appropriate for what he's proposing. So a lot of people, kind of got to mocking him because he was losing his mind. And one of those people is someone, quite a serious person, actually, Brian Rydell. He's a Manhattan Institute senior fellow, and he says the cost of the Green New policies would be about $100 trillion. He says before getting into green policies, there is a call for single payer, $32 trillion, jobs guaranteed. That's for the people who are unwilling to work. Just give them money from the government. Government means you, by the way. Whenever you hear me say the government, that's us. We pay for that. The jobs guarantee would cost $7 trillion. What looks like UBI for the poor, $5 trillion. Education, family leave, job training, retirement security, etc., $2 trillion. So $46 trillion before they even get to the green portion. So how do we pay for, according to Brian Rydell, he's asking the question, replacing 250 million gas vehicles, another $7 trillion, killing most of 200,000 aircraft. 200,000 airplanes would just be sitting around like dust bunnies. What are you going to do with that? Replacing the military jets. What are the military jets going to run on? Let's just go ahead and agree you can't run a F-16 on solar power. You're not going to get windmills on it to run it. You need gasoline-powered engines. High-speed rail everywhere. Can you imagine the drama of... So you never have a quiet moment alone in the car. And that's something that I actually didn't even think about until this Green New Deal came out as something that the Democrats wanted to do. I was just sitting back and I was thinking, how much of our lives do we spend in the car? When our kids were going to the Christian school that is, further away from where we live now, I spent a significant amount of time in the car. And at first, I was kind of just like, we got to get down there. We got to get back. That was the thing. But then I realized, well, first of all, I have the kids captive on the way down there. This is an opportunity. And so we started using it to discuss scripture. We would pray together. Sometimes I would ask them for some more details about something that was going on at school. And it became a real special time for us. And then on the way back, I would pop in, I listened to Charles Krauthammer books on CD from the library. And it was just so fascinating that I got to kind of count on that time, because when I'd be at home, there's cleaning, there's taking care of the dog, there's, before I had this radio show Monday through Friday, it was more, I had 1 hour. And so I would, do some show prep, and I did a lot of radio interviews. But when I was in the car, it was like none of that stuff could happen. I didn't usually do radio interviews in the car, very rarely. So it was like almost I had a little cocoon of, it's going to take me 20, maybe with traffic, 26 minutes to get back up here. Okay, so I can listen to some more of this book on CD. I could make a phone call. I could, reach out to my mom or my sister. Hey, how are you doing? I haven't talked to you in a bit. What's going on with you? Or just silence. I remember there being many times where I'd be in the car and I would see the traffic start to pile up, and, you kind of just glance up a little bit. And I began to, and this, I'm not talking about spiritualism or anything, but I began to really see, like off in the clouds, you can see the different cloud formations and the shapes, and it became it was like a comfort, because the sky is different every day. God shows us his love through his creation and the varied beauty of his creation. And I began to notice a lot of the scenery surrounding, the highway, if I'm stuck in traffic. Sometimes I would turn the radio off, not have an audiobook on, and just have some quiet time in there. And so I know a lot of things go on in the car. As a mom with other mom friends, the stories are never ending of the things that happen in the car, the moments where kids share, the outbursts, the, angry moments, kids fighting over space on the second row, the revelations that people share, the little victorious moments. I got an A on this, they can't wait to tell you. They get in the car. How much of all that, what I just described, happens on light rail, where you're on there with a bunch of strangers and you have to keep your kids quiet so they're not bothering anybody? So everybody just puts some earbuds in and looks at their screens and rides in silence. And of course, you're having to do this for your groceries too. Like if you're a minivan person, I'm not anymore, but I was for 15 years. My minivan was my transport mechanism for all of the toilet paper, the cleaning supplies, the bleach, the Tide Pods, everything, the paper towels. Back when the kids were wearing pull-ups and I had 2 in pull-ups and, it was just all that stuff I had to carry. I would go to the grocery store and buy it. I'd go to Sam's Club and buy it and load my minivan up with it and then bring my minivan home and back it, into the garage and unload it. I'd be doing all this during the day by myself. No complaints. I'm just speaking about the logistics of momming in America today and all the supplies that we have to have. We're supposed to give up the ability to shop like that and only buy things online and have stuff delivered to the house so that we can have the privilege of riding with a bunch of strangers on light rail. And I want to be clear here. That's just part of the annoying stupidity that is the Green New Deal. He talks about the research and development, installing renewables everywhere, upgrading and replacing 120 million buildings. One good thing that comes out of the Green New Deal is we get a whole bunch of facts we didn't know before. Like, did you know there were 120 million buildings in the United States? I didn't. I hadn't thought to ask or count or Google it. But apparently that's true. Replacing, did you know there were 250 million gas vehicles in this country? I didn't. That's new to me. Yeah, high-speed rail everywhere. So can you imagine, like right now, we only have high-speed rail in the urban areas, and sometimes you'll see a rail line go out into the suburbs, but the rail lines never go out and branch off into enough areas to make it possible for you to catch light rail by walking from your residence to the rail station. That's true in Chicago and New York City and, urban metros like that. But in St. Louis, how far? Look, you have to walk 30 miles in the morning to get to a rail station. You'd have to walk 8 miles in the morning or maybe ride your bike. Light rail in America as it stands today does not preclude having a car. You either have to catch a ride-sharing system where one person agrees to drive this week and then next week it's another person, or one person drives for a month, next month is another person. Everyone shares the cost, and y'all ride to the metro. They also have ride sharing. I know a lot of government employees do it that work they work far off from where they live. So they work in Maryland and it's a 55-minute trip each way. So they do a ride share where one person drives for the whole week and the next week the next person drives and everyone in the car shares the cost and they ride. And it's like 5 or 6 people and they commute together and they actually drive a little van that is given to them by their employer for this purpose. And that is something that people do. Like there's a lot of things that people are doing that are innovative, that save gas, reduce the number of cars on the road, and are, supplemented by their employer. But to eliminate 250 million gas vehicles, just think about the lack of convenience. Only having public transportation, never being able to say at 9:30, let's just zip over to the movie theater. You got to take 4 light rail trains to get to the movie theater. Maybe the liberals are telling us we won't be going to the movie theater anymore. We'll only be watching Netflix videos at home, and Netflix will be the only channel. Do you see how totalitarian the whole thing is? Replacing the military jets. Again, what universe do they think we're living in which we would take our highly advanced, military and everything that it comprises that's currently run on fossil fuels, and we would just scrap all of that just so we could be cool with the Democrats? Nobody wants this. Rydell, here's a quote from him. He says, "I've been costing out legislative proposals for 18 years. This is what he does for a living. So I guess he's the guy, if you're at a party or an event with him, he's the guy where you're sitting there and you go, gee, Brian, I wonder how many bikes are in this country? And he'd be like, 800 million. He'd be the one to know. He'd be the one to tell you that. He's been doing this for 18 years, and he says this stuff cannot even be costed out. It's basically incalculable. Climate change is an existential threat to humanity and our way of life. We've put forward our plan to save global humanity, and Mitch McConnell is sabotaging it by putting it to a vote publish. And that was Stephen Miller mocking Ed Markey for his ridiculousness. Between Brian Rydell and Stephen Miller and others who have been mocking this whole thing, I think we see how implausible it is. But my question is, how do people like this, who put forward ideas like this, actually have odds in their favor for winning the presidency in 2020. It's as if the common sense of half of America has completely left, just vacated the space. And it's unbelievable. All right, as we close out the show, I want to give you the India Partners information one more time. Provide a day of safety for $7.08 for children living in India's red light districts. It's 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396, or head over to afr.net where the clicking is easy and fast, and you can get it done and get on about your afternoon. God bless you from the Heartland citizens. Tomorrow's another day. Be with you then.